Your IEEE membership means access to insurance products featuring exclusive group rates, flexible benefit options, and portable coverage that stays with you throughout your career. Engineered to help protect your loved ones and your financial security. For more information, go to IEEEinsurance.com.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our IEEE-USA webinar, Becoming an Intentional Engineer, Creating a Purpose-Driven Life and Career. I'm your host, Jonathan Cho. We're grateful to our sponsor, the IEEE Member Group Insurance Program, powered by AMBA, for supporting today's event. Please note that this webinar is not affiliated with or endorsed by our sponsor. Our presenter for today is Jeff Perry. Jeff Perry is a leadership and career expert known for helping individuals, teams, and organizations unlock their potential in all facets of life. Given his background in engineering, business, and leadership, he specializes in working with engineering and technical professionals. The principles he shares are universal. Jeff is the author of the best-selling book, The Intentional Engineer, a guide to a purpose-driven life and career for engineers and technical professionals. We'll provide the link to the book as well as Jeff's contact information below and in the comment section. Without further ado, I'll now pass it off to our presenter. Welcome, Jeff. We're very excited for what you have in store for our audience today.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. So excited to be here with you and with everyone who's with us. And you said right at the beginnings we were starting here, or the IEEE kind of overlay, saying building careers and shaping public policy. Well, today is going to be focused on the building career portion. And I do that with this word intention. But to start off, I want to make sure that all of us are connected and contributing to the experience that we're going to have today. And so I want to start off with a question. And I'm going to do this throughout the session, do these what I call quick chat experiences where I want to ask for your feedback and participation here. And the question I'm starting off here is one that allows you to contribute and also get value and give value to everyone who participates here right from the very beginning. So the question is, what's one of the best pieces of career advice you've ever received? And the hope is that by thinking about this, you'll bring something up to your mind and be like, oh, have I been acting in that way recently? And also you can share and receive some excellent advice from what others share. So please make sure to throw your answer in the comment here, and that'll stream in as we continue. I'm not going to dwell on it, but it's a way for you to give and get some great value. No matter what else I say, that may be some of the best stuff that you get out of the entire experience. Jonathan did a great job of a brief intro. Just a little bit more about me. I focus on leadership and career development. As he said, I authored the book, The Intentional Engineer, a guide to a purpose-driven life and career for engineering and technical professionals. My background's in mechanical engineering, but I also spent time in software development, manufacturing, engineering, leadership, and more. And I've got 4 little kids, lovely wife, and love getting outside. Been into pickleball the last few years. So if there are any pickleball fans, love to connect with you. It's been a lot of fun. And really, I think about my experience of coming from engineering now into doing coaching and training, where I spent a whole lot of my career building processes and products as an engineer. And now I focus on building people. And it's really rewarding to be able to do that. So I'm big on intention. So I like to set my intentions for what I'm trying to accomplish with you today. We're going to talk about that word intentional, why it's so powerful, and what you can get out of that. We're going to talk about mindsets as a foundation for driving any changes that we want to make in our life or career. We're also going to talk about networking with purpose and intention, because the network and the relationship we have can be a huge factor to the type of career that we have. So those are my intentions, and I have just a few invitations. If you're here, I invite you to be present, be open to new ideas. If there are things that maybe you don't immediately agree with or that are new for you, just be open to try something and be receive, and be willing to take action, because if you're giving yourself this time to learn and understand these ideas, I invite you to do something with that, because you can learn the ideas, but unless you do something and take action, then it's not going to be nearly as impactful for you. Okay, so those are a few invitations. Be present, try and eliminate any other distractions that you have, and be here now. All right, so I want to do another one of these quick chats. And just for you to maybe note for yourself, you can share it in the chat if you'd like, but what's your intention for this session? I set my intentions. I want you to set your own intention for this session, and hopefully that'll help you orient and be in the right headspace to get as much as you can out of that. So feel free to share that in the chat or just write it down for yourself, but set, even if just in your mind, your own intention for what you hope to get out of this. Okay. Now, I want you to reflect for just a moment. This is a model I created around kind of the process that we might move through as we progress in our careers. And I want you to think about, where's your career right now? Okay, so you can see kind of level one, if you're feeling overlooked, that's usually people in a career space as far as like being unemployed. And there's a lot of people out there that are struggling with that, with layoffs and other things. And I talk to them all the time. And it can be a hard space to be in without money coming in and other stuff. There's a lot of stress and anxiety that comes along with that. So if that's where you're at, that's a tough place to be. I also talk to a lot of people in kind of this level two, where maybe they're in kind of the survival mode. They're like, I'm just doing what I need to do to get by, feels obligatory, not making as much money according to their potential or their education or something. Maybe they feel underemployed at the moment. But I would say probably the majority of people that I talk to that are trying to be more intentional about their careers are kind of in this level three, where they've kind of been opportunistic about their careers. They're taking the opportunities that are coming their way. They're being paid well, like a lot of engineers are and engineering leaders, but they might feel disengaged or misaligned in some way with where their career is at and what they're working on and the purpose of that, or maybe it feels misaligned with their life goals or other responsibilities there, and so that's tough. So they're okay, right? But we might not say, they might not feel like they're thriving. They feel like there's another level to that. And so you can see there's this separation line, and the separation, the tipping point to really get on the other side is intention, right? To be more intentional. And what intention does, it gets us to purposeful growth. And that usually leads to more financial wellness and more joy, satisfaction, and alignment in our lives and our careers. And that's good. And hopefully that will also lead us to kind of this higher level, this fifth level of having impact outside of ourselves, because we hope that we're impacting not just ourselves. We don't just want to feel good, but we're impacting going beyond who we are and what we do. And so we can kind of think about what would be my life's work, my life's purpose in a larger aspect. And intention is kind of the gateway to that. So it's just kind of a consideration for you to think, like, where are you at in your career? So I just love to see in the chat, like level 1 through 5, just throw that in there and I can put that slide back up. But which level do you find yourself in your career? So I'll show that up for a moment so you can reference that, put that into the chat, and we'll see what that looks like as you continue forward. And I want you to just be willing to accept, no matter what level you're at right now, accept that. That's okay. We kind of need to start where we are, but that lets us know, hey, there's progress to be made. How can I begin to level? And different sort of leveling up in terms of, we're not talking about like, climbing the corporate ladder. It's more about our orientation with our career and how we feel about it is the real change, right? So, all right. So I told you that intention is kind of the gateway to a lot of this stuff. And I've used that word a lot, but I want to step back for a moment and think about, what is intention really? When you think about intention, what comes to mind? And what experiences have you had? If perhaps there are any people who are yogis out there, you practice yoga, maybe you've been to a yoga class and the yoga instructor suggested that, hey, set your intention before you start the practice of yoga, right? Maybe you've had that experience. Sometimes intention gets kind of put synonymous with the concept of focus, where we want to be intentional with our time, right? I guess for me, intention is all about being purpose-driven, being aligned in our life and career, And it's a great word that kind of describes the concept of matching the what we are doing and focusing on with why we are doing it, the real reasons, the motivations behind all of this. And so it's a very powerful concept that can allow us to have more purpose and focus in our lives. I think it's well captured in a quote from one of my mentors, Richie Norton. Richie, I worked with in a time in my life and career where I felt a lot of uncertainty and anxiety. There was a big transition going on, and he's kind of an expert in that space. And I came across this quote from him, and it changed some things for me. It says, "Intentional living is the art of making our own choices before others' choices make us." And at the time, I was kind of at that level 3 where I was opportunistic in my career. I'd kind of been taking a lot of the things that were coming my way, and I was doing well. I was growing in my career for the most part, but it wasn't really taking me where I wanted to go. And so this helped me recognize that I had a choice. I didn't need to just be opportunistic and take the things that others presented for me, that I could say, this is where I want to go. This is what I want to focus on. And I can go create a life in this way, right? So intention really influences our choices. But it's easy to think about, let's contrast this with, it's easy to think about what it looks like when we're perhaps not intentional. And there are a lot of stories and examples of this. One of my favorites is that of Alice in Wonderland. If you've ever watched the old movie or read the old book. And at one part of the story, Alice is going through this dark forest, and she comes to a fork in the road, and she's not sure which way to go. And she comes across this kind of wily, clever character, the Cheshire Cat. And the Cheshire Cat speaks truth, although he's not necessarily a very helpful mentor. And Alice simply asks, which way should I go? To which the cat replies, well, that depends on a great deal on where you'd like to end up. And Alice says, well, I don't much care where I get to. And he's like, well, then any path will get you there. And she's like, so long as I get somewhere. And he says something to the effect of, well, you're sure to do that as long as you walk long enough. Maybe you've had a moment in your life or your career that has maybe felt like that a little bit, where you see a diverging paths. You're like, I just know that I don't want to be where I am, but I don't really care where else I go. Or maybe you see a bunch of different paths, get caught in that analysis paralysis. Which way should I go? Will someone just tell me or make that decision for me so that I know which path to take? When it's really your choice to make. And it ought to be informed by you being intentional and deciding where you want to go. These are tough decisions. I don't want to make light of it, but we can use the power of intention and getting clarity about what we care about and why to help us make those big choices in life, and the small choices too, as we make choices that are aligned with our values and the things we care about. So it's a little bit on what being intentional, what not being intentional looks like. But let's talk about for a moment what being intentional does look like. I want to just use a couple metaphors here for you. So one is thinking about like the North Star. For those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, it's this unchanging point in the night sky where it points in a consistent direction, right? Our intentions aren't necessarily like this X marks the spot magical destination on a treasure map that says like, hey, when you're here, like everything's, perfect and we know exactly how to get there. But having this kind of direction, this North Star, this guiding light that says, this is the direction I'm going to go. The path I take might be a little bit windy, and that's okay, right? As we continue to have different experiences, we try out different things, and that's fine. The other thing I like to think about in terms of intention is it can act as a filter. So, this time of year, there's a lot of wildfires and stuff. So I love to get a nice filter for my home, air filter that can filter out some of the smoke. And so I think about our intentions can act as filters, as opportunities or different circumstances or potential things that could take our time come our way. We can use those filters of our intentions, our values, our purposes, and say, does that meet the criteria for the things I care about? If it does, I can let that through. If not, I can stop that, and I don't need to take any more time on that because it doesn't meet the things that are most important to me, my intentions, right? So there's a couple different ways that we can utilize this power in our lives, in our careers. Final kind of analogy I want you to think about, just in terms of orienting your career in a more meaningful way, or maybe to reduce some of the pressure, the stress, is to think about the concept of prototypes. Now, these are like some 3D printed parts. I come from the mechanical engineering world, so it resonates with me in terms of like a lot of times when we were designing a product, we'd 3D print something to try something out. We'd put it in, we'd test a fixture or something like that. And that would allow us to quickly, usually try something physical to test functionality and sizing and fit and all sorts of things. And the whole purpose of a prototype is to try something out, collect data, and be able to continue to iterate through. We aren't finished products in our lives. And sometimes we look at other people as finished products, like, hey, they've got it all figured out. I want to be just like them. But everyone that we interact with and meet is an unfinished product. We're all prototypes. And every stage of your life and your career is a prototype. And when we think about it this way, say, hey, we're just running experiments, we're trying stuff. And sometimes they're going to be big experiments. If you make a whole career transition, sometimes we can do a little small experiment on the side, or we can try something out in terms of having a conversation to explore a different industry or role or company or something that we want to learn more about. We can run these smaller experiments to just see, how does this work? And how does that resonate? But being intentional about, are those experiments leading us towards where we want to go, or at least helping us collect the data that we need in order to continue to make decisions and progress in that general direction. So hopefully that's helpful for you. So I want to give you a moment here to do a little bit of reflection and to clarify some of your own intentions. So I'm going to give you a few seconds here, and I want you to just ponder. I invite you to get out a journal or a notepad or a piece of paper or even a sticky note, whatever you've got nearby, and spend some time on these questions, thinking about like, what is most important to me in my career? What maybe is a unique aspect that I call genius zones, which we could do a whole presentation on that, but I'm just going to briefly introduce this concept in terms of what might be a unique area of contribution, a genius zone that I have that I can utilize in a unique way. And how do I want my career to support my life goals and ambitions? Who do I want to become? Intentionality, being intentional is really about becoming who we want to become instead of just accomplishing something, right? And we'll have links at the end, and maybe it's already been put up, to a related workbook for my the Intentional Engineer book. There's a related workbook. You can get a free copy of the digital workbook, and you can find some more questions like this in chapters 5 and 6 of the book if you get it, and the workbook, which we'll provide for free for you. So I want to give you just a little bit of time here and spend some time in quiet reflection here as you, and give yourself some time. And I want you to at least get started on this. And if you can at least get started, then maybe after the webinar, a little bit later today, I invite you to do that as soon as possible, then you can continue forward. But get just a little bit of that momentum going in terms of reflecting on questions. And I'll give you a few other activities and pondering questions as we go throughout the webinar as well, because I want you to do the work, right? Instead of just present the ideas, I want you to have some time to do the work and make some progress and take action on this. Okay, so give you just a few more seconds here before we move on, and to grab the questions so you can be able to make some progress here. Okay. All right, so hopefully that's helpful to have a little bit of that time. But there are challenges to being intentional. One of those that's really difficult for me is the challenge of uncertainty. And I came across this quote a few years ago, and it hit me hard the first time I heard it, and I've kept it around a lot, and I share it a lot because for a lot of people that uncertainty is difficult. Engineers who want to control all the variables, do all the analysis, we can come out with a predictable outcome. Sometimes that's hard to face, and there's a whole lot of uncertainty in life generally and in our careers. We don't know how something's going to work out, but sometimes that uncertainty can cripple us to the point where we are crippled in inaction. And so this quote by a psychologist by the name of Virginia Satir, she says that most people prefer the certainty of misery to the misery of uncertainty. I want you to think about that for a moment. Has that happened to you before? And maybe, perhaps, you're in that space right now where it feels easier to stick with something that you know, even if it's not a great fit, because the concept or the prospect of going to something different seems even harder, right? So that's one challenge, right? I want to acknowledge these. Another one is, we'll just kind of put it under this umbrella of the author Stephen Pressfield in his book, The War of Art. He kind of personifies it. He calls it resistance. And I love this quote. I'm not going to read all of it, but he says, resistance is experienced as fear. And the more fear we feel about a specific enterprise, the more certain we can be that that enterprise, that change or that movement or intention that we have maybe is important to us and to the growth of our soul. So if there's fear there, maybe we can reframe that and say, that means that I care about this and this is important. So it's okay. We can accept the fear instead of being crippled by it, which I know I have before, and maybe you have as well. So give you just a moment here and feel free, if you're willing, to share it in the chat. Are there fears there and uncertainty or other fears, that might be influencing you in some way? What are you afraid of in terms of really going after and being purpose-driven with your intentions in your life and your career? When you think about, well, this is what I really want to do, but that doesn't make sense. What's holding you back, right? Do you have a primary resistance or a thought or belief that keeps saying, no, that doesn't make sense. I can't do that. So it just pulls you right back. It's good to identify that, which means then you can do something with it and acknowledge it. Okay. So it's just an invitation to identify that. If you feel willing to share it in the chat or the comments, we'd love to see that as well. And then you can get it outside of yourself so you're not holding on to it all on your own. Okay. All right. So we've gone up pretty deep in the concept of intention. And now I want to talk about how our mindsets influence our intentions and the changes that we're trying to make. Mindsets are extremely powerful. And when I think about mindsets, we could talk about all sorts of different things, but I think of mindsets as our orientation. I think of mindsets as kind of like our internal operating system. And so in like a digital environment, right, we think about the concept of inputs and outputs, right? Our mindset is kind of like our internal operating system, where if there's a bug in the system, we could have the right input, but it might get translated on the other side with bad outputs. And so we might misinterpret things. We're not seeing reality. Maybe we see a distorted view of other people or situations, which might influence our actions in a not so helpful way. But the right mindset can help drive us in the right direction. Okay. And really our mindset, we think about that our mindsets drive our behaviors and actions, which drives our results, right? So how we think, how we feel, our orientation towards things, that drives what we do, which drives what happens in the end, right? And most of the time, when people are trying to reach a new goal or do something different, or it's saying, hey, this is where I'm at now, this is where I want to be, we start prescribing changes in our actions and behaviors. And that's mostly where we focus. We say, here's the projects we need to do. Here's the task list. Here's this new habit that I need to form, or whatever that is, right? So it looks a little bit like this, where we're trying to go for this new target and we say, here's all the actions and behaviors I need to do. But we often neglect our mindsets, our beliefs, and our attitudes, which actually means that those mindsets are going to pull us right back to where we were before. Okay. And so the change is often unsustainable. But if instead we can transform our mindsets along the way, that can create a solid foundation for our actions and behaviors to move and change along with that sustainably, which allows us to make that change, reach that new goal, that new set of desired results that we are after. Okay. So, and the challenge here is if we are neglecting the mindsets, then it kind of feels like if you've ever driven a car and you've put your foot on the brake and the gas pedal at the same time, the brake is holding the car from moving, but the gas is revving up, but it's using a lot of energy, but you're not actually going anywhere. So you're kind of working against yourself. And that's what it feels like when we're not changing our mindsets, but we're trying to make big changes, right? And that can be a change in any aspect of life, our health, our career, our family, relationships, whatever that is, right? Our mindsets has a huge impact on that. The author, Stephen R. Covey, author of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he would call this a paradigm. Okay, so very synonymous with the concept of mindset as I'm talking about this. He says paradigms are powerful because they create the lens, I love that metaphor, the lens through which we see the world. The power of paradigm shift is the essential power of quantum change. And we could even talk about that from a scientific perspective. Whether that shift is an instantaneous or a slow and deliberate process. Sometimes shifting a mindset and belief can happen in an instant, and sometimes it's a change over time. Either way, it's a foundation for change. Changes the way that we see things. We can see reality instead of seeing a distorted view as we improve that internal operating system. Okay, so a few things for you to ponder in terms of thinking, okay, is there something that I want to change? And since we're career focused, let's think about in your career situation. What's a big change that you want to make in your career? So I'm going to give you a little bit of time and give you a few questions and things to brainstorm. Okay. So let's first of all just think of okay, are there 3 to 5 big changes you want to make in your career, your leadership, how you approach things? That could be the role you have, that could be your relationships with coworkers, that could be learning a new skill or growing in your competence in some area. There's all sorts of things could happen. I want you to think about what are the things that would make the biggest impact on your ability to succeed and move towards your intentions and become who you want to become, right? So that's the next question. And to say, let's make a list of 3 to 5. So you've got a few different ones. And then here's some filter questions, like which one would actually make the biggest impact if I really focused on that, okay? And then a whole other concept, sometimes those things that are those resistances, or maybe the things that are like holding our foot on the brake while we're trying to make progress. One way we can categorize those, we call them hidden commitments, things that we're committed to that maybe we're not even all that aware of. What are those things that are holding you back from making this change? Right? So you got a few seconds here. Start brainstorming. And again, I want you to get a little bit of momentum and progress here, and you can come back to this. But what are those things that might be holding you back? And again, there's more on these concepts. Chapters 3 and 4 in the book and workbook are all about mindset shifts and why that's important. So if you want to go grab those now or later, there are all sorts of extra activities and reflection exercises that can help you. You say, hey, there's some sort of change I want to make in my life, my career, my leadership, whatever that is. And how do I identify those hidden things that are holding me back and work intentionally to make that shift. Okay. And if anyone wants to share, I invite you to, after you've had a little bit of time to do that, to share with us, hey, what's that big change that that you identified? Did you choose one? Did you identify, hey, this is going to make the biggest impact for me? And if you want to share that, feel free to share that in the comments. We'd love to see that. And again, this allows you to be more open and more likely to have a little bit more accountability to say, I'm going to actually do something about this change and make it happen. Okay. So we've talked about intention. We've talked about mindset as the foundation of change and driving towards our intentions and the shifts and results and achievements we want to make. And now I want to talk about the power of our network and our relationships and networking in the professional space. Now, I think that networking often gets a little bit of a bad rap, or it's just misunderstood a little bit. So I want to diffuse maybe some of the ideas that you have about networking, and I want to simplify it. When you think about networking, networking is not about handing out business cards or getting more connections or followers on LinkedIn or other social media platforms. Networking is about building relationships. It's all about relationships. I heard another person I talked to, and she said, it's just making friends. Okay. And we might say friends in a professional context. To bring in the concept of intention, I would call it connection with intention. We're trying to connect with people, human to human, person to person. And if I feel like, oh, there's actually a connection there, some sort of relationship, then that's a good thing. And there's two different ways that we can work on these relationships, or at least directions that we can think about it. And one is to deepen our relationships with the people that we already know, right? Family, close friends, close work associates, whatever that is. The other one is to expand our network in terms of new people that we are getting to know and want to get to know and are trying to connect with in some form or fashion. So we want to deepen and expand our network, and that has its limits, but kind of the two directions that we can do that, right? So I want to share a quick story of how this can work and the type of influence that this can have. So a few years ago, I was working with a coaching client of mine, and he was a mechanical engineer, but he actually decided he wanted to go into robotics. So while he was working in his mechanical engineering role, he took a master's degree program, a high level one, in robotics. And so he got his master's degree, but for a number of months, I think it was about 8 months after he graduated, he was still having a really hard time actually making that transition to a robotics role from his mechanical engineering role. And there was a lot more software, autonomous driving. He was interested in the autonomous vehicle world and stuff like that. And one of the things that we recognized that he needed to work on, which is true of anyone who's trying to make a career transition, is the importance of connecting with people, because it's not job boards or resumes that hire people, it's people that hire people. So the more you can connect with people, deepen and expand your network, the more likely you are to have those different sorts of opportunities. Okay. And he just said, I'm not good at networking. And so this goes back to the mindset concepts. He says, and so I invited him to add just one word to the end of that sentence. I said, yet. Add that to the end. You're not good at networking yet. And this concept comes from the growth mindset idea, if anyone's familiar with that, from the work of Carol Dweck. And he's like, okay, not good at networking yet, but I can be. He said, okay, let's do it. And so he worked diligently to shift his mindset around his possibility of becoming a good networker and what it meant in terms of his orientation towards other people, not just focused on what he wanted out of them, but also changing his mindset and focus around how he could contribute to other people or to companies and things. And that mindset shift had huge ramifications in his orientation towards networking, because he went from having virtually 0 interviews and he wasn't making any traction to get a new job in robotics, to there was 1 week he's like, I have 8 interviews scheduled this week, and he was like overbooked with interviews, and so not bad for someone who thought he was bad at networking, right? So an interesting experience there. And so it just shows some of the power of connecting with people in this way. So I want you to consider, just for a moment, like scale 1 to 5, 5 being the highest or the strongest. How strong is your professional network right now, right? When you think about like, how are my relationships? Do I know different sorts of people? Is it a diverse network, or do I only know the people that I actively work with? Do I know people inside and outside my company? Do I know people in my community? Are there others, family, friends that I'm connected with and actually have good relationships with? Like, what's the strength of your professional network right now? Throw that in the chat. I'd love to see. And it's good to just kind of note that. But, and again, to just accept like, okay, if it's a 1 or a 2, that's fine. But instead of being down on yourself about it, say, okay, well, that means that I have opportunity to grow and change. That's great. I've seen some numbers come in, someone saying 3, that's fine. And so you've got opportunities to shift. That's great. Okay. So no matter what you put there, just want to talk about for a moment, like some of the places where you can deepen and expand your network. So we can do this in a few different places. We can do this internal to your organization. So if you've got a job, you're working right now, you can do this. You can deepen the relationships with people on your team or inside of your organization, other people in your organization, like, hey, they're doing cool stuff or they're working on cool projects. I want to connect with some of the things that they're doing, even if you want to make a shift in there. Great places that you can do that. You can find, you can deepen those relationships with your leaders or mentors instead of it just being a transactional experience like, hey, leader says, yeah, we got to get these stuff done. Okay, you check off those things. You do your task for the project or the thing that you're working on is great. Okay, cool. And if that's all the relationship with it is, then it's not going to be that in-depth and supportive. But if you can build and connect with them as a person and get to know them, get curious about them, and they get curious about you, and you talk about career and life stuff, then it can go a little bit deeper, right? Maybe find some other mentors inside of your organization. It's great to also do the same things outside of your organization, because people outside of your organization will have different perspectives, experiences, people that they're connected with. They do things in a different way. And so if you ask questions, then maybe you can take some of the ways that they do things, bring that into your own organization, which could help you be more effective or just have some great ideas or insights and improve on things. And, all sorts of reasons why that could be helpful. A lot of, especially larger companies, will have things like employee resource groups that are around different ethnicities or nationalities, or orientations and things, and that's great. Other professional groups that you might have that are part of your industry. IEEE obviously is a great example. Something like a professional association, which can be great, and connect with that or other things, events and conferences, which is a lot of times when we think about networking events, right? But that's not all it is. Then also thinking about just in your community, if you're involved in sports or music or drama or other causes that you care about, or maybe your kids you're already attending and participating in other things in your community, instead of just going and showing up and leaving, can you make an intention to say, hey, when I'm at these places, can I go have some extra conversations and introduce myself to a few people? And you never know who else you might meet that could be helpful. So this helps us to diversify our network and get curious and seek to understand people a little bit better. And so I want to, and because our orientation towards other people and how we view them has a huge influence on how we approach networking. So let me share with you something that I call the elevator of connection, right? Because networking is about relationships or connection with intention, right? So you think about some of the ways that you might describe how you feel towards another person. And you can probably imagine that if you feel any of those things that are down below in red towards someone, then your relationship probably feels a little bit strained and not great, right? So if you feel resentment or judgment or indifference towards someone, it's going to be really hard to develop a deep transformational relationship with them where you want to help them and they want to help you. It's just hard to do that. And so I think about this concept in terms of an elevator, right? So most elevators, there's the upper floors and there's kind of the basement floors if there's a parking garage or something like that. And so those ones in red are the basement, below ground level emotions or orientations towards other people. But the ground floor, the tipping point here, is curiosity. I mentioned that word curiosity a couple times here, but if you can get curious with someone, that's a gateway to more connection because you're curious about what they do, what they care about, why they care about it. You're interested instead of just trying to be interesting, right? And that can lead to appreciation, acceptance of who they are, maybe empathy, even these higher level emotions and orientations towards other people. But the gateway is curiosity. So if you find yourself having a hard time with someone, but you want to improve that relationship, that level of connection, that network, and you're feeling any of those basement floor feelings towards them, I invite you to just push that up button on the elevator and get to curiosity. Can you at least get there? And then maybe that'll help you go up a little bit further. I want to share an example here where another client of mine was doing this. She is originally from the African continent, and she traveled to Canada, moved to Canada actually, when she was 18 years old to attend school and start her career. Got a visa and everything to make that happen. And she, it was great. She found different groups in the community, other things that aligned with her African heritage. And that was great. That's where she found a lot of her social friends and different things. And that was fantastic. But when she got into her career, it felt hard for her to relate with people at work outside of just a task she wanted to get done. So she was very transactional. She's like, I just want them to tell me what to do so I can show up and do it and get out of here and live my life. And so she had a hard time making connections. And so I shared this elevator of connection concept with her and said, you know what, like, how can you just get curious about them? She's like, I'm not interested in the things that they're interested in, the sports, and I don't have kids and family and all that stuff yet. And like, okay, well, just get curious about that. You don't need to suddenly be a sports fan, but can you get curious about them and why they care about it? Because she would have people invite her to like eat lunch with them, and she's like, I just sit there, I don't know what to talk about. I said, just start with curiosity. And this changed things for her, where she started to show up and really start to care about people in a bigger way and develop deeper relationships where she could lean on them and they could lean on her a little bit more when they're working on projects together. And so this can be pretty transformational in the right circumstances. Okay. So yeah, just push that up button and get curious. One more thing I want you, well, a couple more things I want you to think about in terms of a networking tool or skill that you can use, and is that of informational interviews. Informational interviews, when we're talking about deepen and expand, informational interviews, one of the best places to begin a new relationship, to expand it, instead of just like, hey, you connect with someone on LinkedIn, you chat with them a couple of times, but how can you actually have a conversation? So then there's this human to human connection. So it's about building rapport, starting that relationship. They're great ways to collect information about a company, an industry, or just that person and their story and the things that they learned. And then that could turn into a potential relationship that you may want to continue forward and help. You don't want it to just be this, again, transactional, hey, thanks for a conversation, never chat with you again. But hopefully you can come back, continue to reach out to them, connect with them when circumstances make sense to do that. And so it's always interesting to me to ask groups like this. And so I'd love for you to just put in the chat, yes or no, have you ever had an informational interview? Most of the time when I ask this question, it's about 50-50, which is kind of sad to me that 50% of people haven't had an informational interview. So again, throw that in the comments. I'd love to hear, have you had an informational interview? Yes or no? Just say yes or no, because I'd love to see. And so the challenge is, if your answer is no, who could you reach out to in the next week or so that you're curious to get to know and have a deeper relationship with, and say, who could I reach out to and ask? And that can be someone, again, internal to your organization, external, and come from any source, but it's just someone that you're curious to get to know a little bit better, have a connection. You think they might have some insights. We're not asking to pick their brain. We're asking to have a good conversation. So start there. So I see, some yeses and nos here in the comments, but what is that for you, right? Final concept in the networking realm is sometimes, especially in terms of like mentoring relationships, we can sometimes get to the point where we feel like, okay, I've had a conversation or a few conversations, and now I don't know what else to do. And so one idea that I like to use is the concept in stories and movies and other things is that the plot needs to advance. There's kind of like the act 1, act 2, act 3. We're not necessarily looking for some final conclusion, but just thinking about, okay, what can you do if a relationship, a conversation, a mentoring agreement feels stagnant ever? How can you advance the plot? What sorts of new things can you ask about? Some new challenges you can tackle together? Some, just any way to advance things along the way. Thinking about what needs to progress, what feels stagnant, how can we move forward? And if you can do that, keep it moving in some way, you're going to be happy with that. So that's just a final little idea on if things feel stagnant. So I want to give you one more little reflection activity in terms of how can you grow, both deepen and expand your network, right? So take a few moments, brainstorm again a few actions that you can take. And here's just a few examples. You might reach out to one new person for an informational interview. Talked about that earlier. You can maybe identify an event that you want to go to locally or digitally, whatever that makes sense for you. Reconnect with someone that you haven't talked to in a while and said, hey, we used to have a great relationship. We haven't chatted in a bit. How can I deepen that relationship or reconnect in some way? Kind of rekindle a relationship if that feels right. And then certainly, and that's sort of the concept of kind of reinforcing a relationship that you're trying to build, advance the plot in some way, right? So just identify a few actions you might take. These are just ideas, but the most important thing, like I asked, my invitation for you is to take action. So to identify the action you're going to take and make some progress, again, with the orientation or the mindset of not just trying to extract what these people can help you, how can you give to those relationships and be curious about them and have that sort of orientation in terms of your network. Okay. So hopefully you've identified a few things and have some maybe action plans to progress your network, because your network there's an old saying, your network is your net worth, right? So the people that you know can have a huge impact on your growth, personally and professionally. Okay, we talked about a lot of different things. As we wrap up, and we'll get to some Q&A in a moment. Talked about intentions, what that means, the power of it, defining those for you and why that's so important. We talked about mindset shifting, those mindsets, beliefs, those attitudes as a foundation of any change you want to make in your life, your career. We talked about how networking is connection with intention. We want to orient towards people in the right way so that we can become who we want to become, and maybe open up some new doors and avenues through the relationships that we make in our careers. So I hope you felt like I met my intentions. So no matter where you're at in terms of your career right now, whether that's a 1, 2, or 3, or maybe you're feeling a 4 or 5, maybe you can sustain that high level or say, hey, how can I move up with a little bit more intention? So no matter where you're at, you've got a choice, right? I think about some of the old physics principles, like this is one of Newton's laws of motion. An object at rest will stay at rest unless it's acted upon by an outside force, right? Excuse me. And this is just as true for us as people as it is for a physical object that we might interact with. So if for any reason you're feeling at rest in your career, like your role or your focus feels misaligned with your personal goals, maybe you're feeling you're plateauing in your growth, you feel like you have limited opportunities to progress, or just know something isn't right and you want to change something, but you don't know exactly how to do that, you can stay at rest or you can take action. And that's my invitation to you. You can expand your network, you can grow with intention. And sometimes you might need to enlist other people in your life as that outside force. And so I'd love to do what I can to help you continue forward, give you some more resources. Some of those have been, sorry, I got a little tickle in my throat. Some of those have been coming through on the screen throughout the presentation. I mentioned you can get the free digital copy of the Intentional Engineer Workbook. Hit that link at the top. It's also on the screen here, and invite you, if you want to connect with me personally, you can do that. LinkedIn's a great way. I'm pretty active there, and we can start a conversation there. There's other ways to connect with me as well if you go to my website and stuff as well. So I want to give you those. If it's easy, you can have these QR codes. You can scan those for the workbook and connect with me on LinkedIn. We've got other links that are coming through, and maybe we can throw those in the comments as well, or some of those already are from Jonathan and the team. So anyway, that gives you some resources to continue forward, maybe be that outside force, and I'd love to be part of that team to support you with any of the work that I do. For you personally, I also do a lot of work with teams and organizations to help increase that alignment, employee engagement, improve leadership, and a number of different things. So if I can help your teams or your organization anyway. But I'd love to take some time. I wanted to thank you for being here, for participating and everything, and take some time for some questions to answer here. If there's anything that we can get to. So thanks, Jonathan. I'll let you facilitate that as we have any questions about any things we talked about today.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Jeff. So folks, we are at the Q&A portion of the webinar. Please post your comments in the questions in the comment section, and we'll load them onto the screen for Jeff to answer. We are, approaching close to the hour. So while we're waiting on some audience member questions, Jeff, I did want to ask some of my own while we're to get the discussion started.
Mm-hmm.
So first off, would love to know what inspired you to write your book, The Intentional Engineer?
Yeah, so when I decided to write it, I've been in this space of doing full-time coaching training work for about 4 years. And the word intention kept coming up in terms of where a lot of people that I ended up working with were those people who were kind of in that level 3, and they just knew something needed to change, but they weren't sure how to make that happen. One person described it as like, I want to find my happy place in my career. Another person was like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. Right? So kind of an interesting concept. and dealing with a lot of that uncertainty, where engineers in particular, who I was working with, are so versatile in what they could do, right? They can solve all sorts of different problems. And so in the end, I always knew I wanted to write a book, but I kept putting it off, putting it off. But eventually I had a couple mentors who were like, hey, when are you going to write that first book? And I had an event that I was doing for another professional association that I was going in person to one of the conferences. Then they said, well, they were going to give me like an exhibit booth. And I was like, hey, how cool would that be if I wrote a book and had it there on the table when I was, chatting with folks? And so I used that as a motivation, kind of a forcing function, sometimes what I call it, in terms of accountability. And I finally committed to writing the book and was able to get that done. So it was really just a way for me to package things together, have it accessible, because not everyone is ready to dive into a full coaching program, but to have a lot of the things there in the book that people could get to, that I've been learning and working with people that I've seen to be transformational over the last few years.
That's awesome. And, I mean, judging from how popular it is, being a bestseller book, clearly it paid off in the end, and a lot of people got a lot of out of it. So, I mean, that's incredible. So my next question, and I think this is a topic that a lot of people tend to struggle with. They're kind of like they have conundrum when they come to this kind of
Mhm.
situation when everyone wants a meaningful career ideally, but they still kind of have to think about like, are they going to make enough money out of this career, or are they going to be financially stable? So my question is, how can one balance financial stability with the pursuit of a meaningful career?
Yeah, great question. And you saw in that kind of 5-layer model that we talked about earlier, is that generally, when we're being more intentional, then financial rewards usually come. That's not always the case, certainly not in the short term. And so, first of all, if people are feeling like they're in kind of that level 2 or 3, there's no shame in that, to take a job or do something that doesn't feel completely aligned right now, because you're doing what you need to do to stay stable, take care of family and loved ones, and pay the rent or mortgage, and whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. You shouldn't feel bad about that. The orientation, I hope, is to not just stay there and settle and say, hey, I want to continue forward in that direction, that guiding light of intention towards where I want to go. So even if I need to do this for now, how can I do the things, learn the things, meet the people, expand or deepen the network, and become the person who can do the things that might feel more meaningful. For some people, that is an industry they might want to work in, or a different sort of role, or it's a company culture that fills them up, or maybe having a little bit more work-life balance or flexibility to be able to work and engage in other things in their personal life. It can be a whole lot of different things. So you need to identify those things that are most important to you. And if that's not happening now, how can you move in that direction, even if things aren't, this ideal dream job at the moment?
Right. No, really great point. I feel like a common pitfall with many people who, try to find a job, new job, they're always looking at the end goal and they're rushing towards that. And they kind of like, there's the cliche, the saying, um, that's about the journey. I know it was longer than that. That quote. But then, it's a cliche saying, but at the same time, there's some truth to it. So many people focus on reaching that end goal that they don't think about what's going on or going that leading up to that end goal. So,
Mhm.
so just to close it off, we did get an audience member question. Um, Audience member John asked, "What can you share about demonstrating knowledge via work experience versus formal education when evaluating opportunities?"
Yeah, a great question. And by the way, I always suggest that you make sure you've got experience to back up when you've got things to do. So even if someone's in school, how can you engage in projects and other things that say, hey, I didn't just learn the concepts, but I can show that I did things and there's something to show for it. So some sort of portfolio or something is nice to have. It's just so both can be useful. It really comes down to, though, like in terms of networking, like can you connect with the people and demonstrate through them in the conversations that, like, yeah, you know what you're talking about, you know what you're doing, and your projects and your experiences and the things you've done, your ability to tell those stories and like an interview situation or other things can hold a huge weight, because they're saying, hey, we need someone who can do these things. But if you've got stories you can tell where you've done those things that they're asking for in a job situation, then that's huge. And it's not someone who says, oh yeah, they say they can do it, but you've got data and experience to show that. So experience goes a long way. There are employers who struggle, and there are plenty of people in engineering and tech who are great and maybe don't have all the formal education, but they've been doing it for 20 plus years, and employers are sometimes still filtering them out because they don't have a certain degree, which I think is really weird and crazy. So you deal with some of those weirdnesses, but again, you're more likely to have the chance if you connect with them and can tell stories about how that experience is relevant. So hopefully that's helpful. Oh, can't hear you, Jonathan.
Apologies. I was saying thanks, John, for the question, and thanks, Jeff. So, folks, unfortunately, we are out of time. I know we could go on about this. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today and giving your expert insights on how we can shift our own mindsets to build meaningful careers. Really appreciate having you with us today. So thank you so much again.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to be with you. And hopefully this is helpful again if people want to connect further and grab the book or other resources, then please feel free to reach out. I'd love to see if I can help.
Absolutely. And thank you to our audience for tuning in and for your great questions as well. For those who would like to order a copy of Jeff Perry's book, The Intentional Engineer, we've included the link to that as well as his free workbook in the comments and chat section, as well as below on the screen. And also feel free to reach out to him personally for a consultation and connect with him on LinkedIn as well. Before we end things off today, I do have a quick announcement. Pardon me. I also seem to have something in my throat. Something's going on. So the announcement: IEEE-USA and IEEE Region 6 are excited to announce the Packaging Chips with Chips Summit on October 17th in Scottsdale, Arizona. Program is nearly finalized, promising an incredible lineup of speakers and sessions. Don't miss out on this opportunity to stay ahead in the industry. As there's only 3 weeks left to register, so register as soon as possible to secure a spot. The link has been provided below and in the comment section. Next, a word from our sponsor, IEEE Member Group Insurance Program powered by AMBA. AMBA excels in offering customized insurance solutions for IEEE members. Whether you need health, life, or disability coverage, AMBA has you covered. Visit the IEEE Member Group Insurance Program website to discover the benefits and options available to you. If you liked the content presented in today's webinar, be sure to check out the other ones. We have an entire catalog of presentations available for your viewing pleasure on our IEEE-USA website. Please like and subscribe to our channels and check back daily on our social media for future live stream updates. Have a great day, everyone.
Your IEEE membership means access to insurance products featuring exclusive group rates, flexible benefit options, and portable coverage that stays with you throughout your career. Engineered to help protect your loved ones and your financial security. For more information, go to IEEEinsurance.com.